All right, everyone, welcome to the wall. Bleh. We're trying that again. It's going in the bloopers.
Am I making you nervous?
Maybe that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably.
All right.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone, Jeff Woods here. Welcome to our monthly One Thing webinar series. We're really excited to kick this month off in our series with Jay and Wendy Papasan.
I'm so excited. I finally made it on the webinar.
You did it.
You haven't had me back in a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to be back.
Yeah.
I'm holding all commentary there. So the purpose of this is, how do you have a goal setting retreat with the people that matter most to you? Which, let's just dive right in. Where did this idea of doing a retreat as a couple come from?
Well, you get credit. You came to me and said you'd been thinking that we need to get on the same page, and you even went on the internet and found a whole bunch of really awkward questions that we were going to ask each other.
Yeah, so our kids were pretty little, and I think our son was maybe 2 and our daughter was maybe 1.
Yeah.
And I think it was a great excuse for us to just take some time away from our children. But yeah, I'd been just not working for a couple years, and just was kind of ready to get back into the swing of things. And so I thought it'd be a good way to kickstart that.
I just remember you came and said, I want to make sure that we're on the same page. It was really stressful. We had 2 kids, like 16 months apart.
Mm-hmm.
So you got 2 kids in diapers. So the home job was really tough.
Yeah. Plus you were working on your book, right? Millionaire.
We had a millionaire real estate investor,
Yeah.
and we were starting our investing. So we had a lot of balls in the air. We had 2 rugrats that were creating enough stress that we it made sense to me, even though I kind of felt like it was one of those, we need to talk when you get home conversations. But it was, we need to talk when we leave the house and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I kind of was dreading it, but after the initial 15, 20 minutes, it was great. It was our first night. We debate about this. It was the first time we'd spent the night away from our kids, because Wendy had the wisdom. I was like, I want to get out of this environment. Because it's easier when you have small kids, because
Yeah, so we got
as
a
soon
little
as you
cabin
get
in the
focused,
woods.
they'd be doing something.
Yeah, we got a little cabin south of Austin, and we were going to spend a couple nights, and it was going to be like a sort of a romantic goal setting retreat.
You got it.
Yeah.
For people who aren't quite familiar with what this means, what does it mean to do a goal setting retreat over a weekend?
It's definitely evolved. In the beginning, it was an excuse for us to it started with our financial goals. We had, because we had worked on the Millionaire Real Estate Investor, we had decided that we wanted to be millionaires, and that meant we were going to start investing in real estate. And that put us both a little out of our comfort zone. I think both of us wanted it, but we weren't sure it was possible. But we knew we had to track it and talk about it, because that meant we had to save money, spend differently. So that was kind of the genesis of the goals part of it.
Well, and I think at the same time too, when you have children, you start to think about your life differently. I know it was like, okay, well, what kind of schools do we want to send our kids to? Do we need to start thinking about saving for college? Yeah.
All that stuff. We had to get our will together.
Yes.
That was something you don't think about until you have kids.
Yeah, we were starting to adult.
Yeah. Big time. Do we still want rock posters on the walls? Concert posters, yeah. So yeah, it was like a little bit of growing up and knowing that our world was starting to get a little out of control, and it just kind of acknowledging that.
Yeah,
I was feeling it.
You fast forward to today. This weekend, you guys are going on your goal setting retreat.
Yeah.
How many will this have been?
Probably what do you think?
A dozen. Yeah, a dozen.
Oh, yes, we're on the same.
2006 is I remember, because Veronica would have been about a year old. I don't think we did it when she was an infant.
Yeah.
So it would have been when she was about a year old, and that was the first time we'd spent the night away from them. That all makes sense to me. So I think it's about 2006.
2006, yeah.
And for sure, I know that we have 10 years of documents saved where we were, it took us a couple of years to find our rhythm, but we started bringing more to the process. What we did last year, we'd start there and then we'd add something.
Yeah.
And it kind of built up its own momentum and became kind of a process.
Yeah. And so it's like flash forward 12 years. And here we are, we have 3 businesses that we run, right? At least, plus the rental properties, right? Which we didn't have any then. Our goal is to start at least 3, maybe 4 or 5 businesses this year. And so, what started as something really simple and basic is now is really complex, where we have to do a lot of pre-work. And we have to do a lot of creating our business plans ahead of time, and we have this whole PowerPoint that we've created around it, and it's very complicated now.
Well, it's like the dominoes in the book, right? We started with a small domino, because we didn't really know what we were doing. And it was probably a lot like most people talk about setting resolutions. I want to lose weight this year, and let's save some money. Let's do better on our budget. It's the normal stuff, but because our goals kept getting bigger, we kept adding to it. And it is a little bit more of a process now, but that happened very organically.
I want to dive into that. So time travel back, you're sitting at your first or your second retreat.
Yeah.
Think about the goals that you were setting that you're going, wow, I'd love to be able to achieve that. And frankly, you're like, I can't see a way that that's even possible. You now fast forward to today. What were some of those goals that not only you achieved them, but it surprised you at how fast it happened?
Well, the millionaire stuff did. I mean, I remember that. And in the very beginning.
You mean becoming a net worth millionaire?
Yeah, that goal. Like we both had a lot of doubts around that. When we started that journey, our combined income was less than $100,000.
Yeah. Well, and our net worth was about $2,200.
Yeah. So it was very modest, to say the least. We didn't have a lot of debt, but we didn't have any assets. And we started looking up, and it started with owning a home and then getting our first rental. But we made a stand around this one idea. If we could save $1,500 a month, right? We kind of did the goal setting to the now before we knew what the goal setting to the now actually was, but we had a good mentor in Gary. And I just remember we kind of made a stand around that. And it was like, so how can we save up our next down payment to buy our next rental property? Because we knew, like, I'm working in this franchise real estate company. Like, we could invest in stocks. There's a lot of things we could have done, but I just remember thinking, one, we wrote a book on it, and we know that it works because of all the research we did. But we get to tap into this network. Like, we're at the center of this whole real estate world. We have an advantage that other people might not. So we need to go double down and make this happen. So I just remember in the beginning, it was like, can we get side work? Can we do a side hustle? Like, it was a lot of it was financial. Like, how little of our income could we live on? How much could we save? In the beginning, the number was $1,500 a month, because back then that would have been about 12 months of that, plus the side hustles was a down payment on a rental property. And we just made it all about that, but that creates its own repercussions. Like, can we really afford to get a new car? Because how are we going to keep our $1,500 savings if we have a car payment? So like the normal things that happen, like your car's dead. Our Tercel went from a 4-cylinder to a 3-cylinder to a 2-cylinder, and then they had to tow it away. We just gave it away to charity, right? Like, you don't plan for that. You think you're thinking in the future, but then all of a sudden one year you're like, well, we got to get a car. So how do we fit that into the goals that we had? So that's my memory of the early years. Is a lot of talk about family, a lot of talk about vacations, and a lot of talk about financials. Those are the three big ones.
Yeah, I would actually say the categories are not so different. I'm sure we talked, in fact, I know we talked about our health. We talked about our family, and even those early ones, we talked about our charitable goals, which was like, how much money do we want to give? How much time do we want to spend, giving our time back towards charitable things. And then, of course, the job, and then we didn't own any businesses back then.
No.
But then the real estate was
the real estate. The giving goals kicked in. I can trace that back as how long we've been involved at the Heroes for Children. So that's about 7 years.
Well, but actually, it happened before that.
I know. There was the 2 years before that where Mary Tennant, at the time our president, had looked up and everybody at work was giving each other Christmas gifts. And so it's obligatory gifts. And she didn't like the way that felt, because imagine, especially if you're the president, all these department heads are walking in with a bottle of wine or whatever, and she's feeling guilty because, like, she's the boss and they're all bringing, like, so she just asked us, would it be okay with y'all if we made a moratorium, no more gift giving? And instead, we take all of the money we were going to spend on each other and either give it or raise money for charities. And so every department got to pick a charity, do their bake sale or whatever, and we did the settlement home. But I just remember that was when I started thinking, oh, we need to plan for this. Like, how can we raise money? Can we give our time to? And that was really in the last 10 years, we got purposeful about that.
Yeah, for sure. So what does it look like today? You have over a decade of repetition and what it looks like to prepare for your goal setting retreat and actually go on the goal setting retreat. Walk people who have never done this before through what this looks like.
Well, it starts with planning the retreat itself. So you've got a plan to get out of town. And so that's actually kind of fun. Like, in the beginning, it was get on Priceline. Like, you were really good. You got on Priceline and found like a really cheap hotel we could drive to because our budget was small. But we still wanted to get out. So we could keep it on a small budget. The biggest expense, I remember that first year, was paying for an overnight babysitter. I just remember thinking that was really extravagant
Yeah.
to get an overnight
Yeah.
because we don't have any
It
family in
was. We had
town.
a family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's big.
accounting for that.
Yeah. And I think it was really just making sure you do 2 nights, right? Because
we
just
didn't do that in the beginning, though.
well, just at least one night. I think
Yes.
some people try to squeeze it in a day, but you definitely want to do an overnight because
Yes.
that's really important because some of this stuff has to really sink in. Yeah, so definitely getting that one night and not being in your house to do it is
Yeah.
super important.
So planning the retreat to get to retreat from your daily life,
Mhm.
it's an overnight. Our tradition usually is we'd go to dinner, so it was like a date for us because we had small kids, and we would talk about what we wanted to talk about the next day.
Mhm.
Today, we start talking, maybe a month or so out about what our agenda might be.
Mhm.
Like Wendy sent me a Google Doc this
Yeah.
year with
But
our agenda,
but that
and so we
first
started
year-
doing some pre-work earlier.
Yeah, but that first year we had a very specific agenda.
Oh,
it
yeah.
was question after question after question, and the questions were broken down into categories like family, job, professional,
Yeah.
finances, charity work,
Mhm.
marriage.
Well, that was in the beginning.
Mhm. Yeah. that
And
was the
today
very
we
first
still
one.
we use the 7 circles in the one thing to ask the question: are we setting goals in all of these areas?
Mhm.
And it's kind of similar. It's just there's more pre-work
Mhm.
because if you own a business, you're creating a business plan that I want to share with her. Or she's creating one that she wants to share with me, and that kind of goes down to the benefits. Not only do things happen, like our wealth grew a lot faster than we ever dreamed it would because we actually got on the same page and we distilled it down to action steps.
Mhm.
And that's happened in a whole bunch of other areas too, from health to fitness and, family stuff that you didn't think would happen, but because we were on the same page and working together, there weren't those surprises. I think a lot of people on this webinar, I bet most of them are independent contractors or are entrepreneurs. Fair?
Mhm.
Well, let's do a poll. If you, in the questions box, if you're an employee, put employee. If you're an independent contractor, put independent contractor. Business owner, put business owner.
Unemployed.
Unemployed, put unemployed. And Kaylin will give us a sense of what that looks like.
Okay.
Well, I was an employee, and within a few years, Wendy started a real estate. So we had an entrepreneur and employee.
Yeah, but
Thinking entrepreneurially.
yeah,
Like I got
3
my
years.
ownership in the publishing company later, and then we had 2 entrepreneurs. But what I've observed, and why people say, "Will you give us your cheat sheet?" For years we had like a little Google spreadsheet that we would send to people or a document. Here's what we do. You copy it.
Right.
Just we got asked enough about it because people heard what we were doing, wanted to explore it,
we've
but wanted
given
to
it
know
out
how.
so many times.
So
over
many
the
times.
years. Yeah.
And so you just look up and I forgot my train of thought now.
I don't know.
Where was that going?
It sounded fascinating.
All right. Totally lost it.
What do we see?
Oh, no, people, entrepreneurs come in, they're like all excited about the new direction they're going. The spouse, usually the employee, that's not the independent contractor or the business owner, just kind of drug along. They get Raggedy Ann through the year. And that's not good for the entrepreneurial person or the spouse. It's not good for their relationship because this person's all excited because they've got the vision. That's what made them get into business for themselves. The other person, the reason they're not in business for themselves, they may be a little bit more conservative. All of those things are scary.
Yeah.
And if people don't have a framework for communicating, hey, here's where we're going, here's what it'll do for our family, then that just creates stress.
Yeah.
It's still stressful, but when you have a framework for talking about it, now you can get on the same page. And if she says, I need to have a dinner party once a month, and I'm the antisocial person, I at least know, all right, she needs to build her sphere so she can build a real estate business. Like I can connect the dots, and it's not her punishing me for something by bringing strangers into my house, right?
But it's not just the framework. I think the framework is very important, but really what it is the time away. I think a lot of people, they intuitively know, yeah, it would be great to do that. And they just never plan for it. So they never put it on their calendar. Like every year, we put our goal setting retreat on the calendar for the next year when we're doing our planning. And so just having that 2 days away where you can be thoughtful about it and really spend time together and just let your processing part of your brain go to work is what can be super powerful.
Yeah.
What do we see?
Equal parts.
Equal parts.
Equal parts.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Even the unemployed people.
We got about 5.
Lots of employed people.
Great.
Well, let's dive down that rabbit hole because as we were having conversations from the people who came to the goal setting retreat last year that we facilitated, a lot of them said they came and they weren't quite sure how to get their other half on board if they weren't a goal setter. A lot of people have raised that question this year. What advice would you give to someone who's watching this or listening to this later and they're just going, I would love to do this with whether it's my significant other or a business partner, but I just don't know how to get them interested?
You go first.
Well, I would say, I would really approach it, you want to approach every problem with what's in it for them, right? And so if you are a goal setter and maybe your partner isn't necessarily a goal setter, although I think like you said before, everybody's a goal setter in that they have dreams and passions and wishes and desires for themselves. And it's really just explaining to them how powerful it can be, because I think that's what people really underestimate, is that power of getting on the same page. And it seems so obvious when you've been doing it for so long, like us. And yet I just know so many people who they're not on the same page. Or it's not that they're not on the same page. It's just maybe they're just one's running here and one's running there. So it's not like they're off kilter, but they're just not as connected as they could be. And there's just power in that.
That plus, times 10. I think that there's real benefits for both partners. I think what people are afraid of is the unknown. So what is this structure or whatever? And I would just tell them, first and foremost, let's have a retreat for our marriage. And let's bring as much structure as you're comfortable with. But at the very least, we've created some space where we can talk about what would you like to happen. Let's not talk about everything that's wrong. What would you like to have happen this coming year in our relationship?
Yeah, it's like really a hopeful thing.
So, start small. So there is this system we have, but if they only did one thing, can they get out of their daily life, at least overnight, and ask a few questions? How are we doing? What do you think we can do better? Where are we doing great? Where can we do better? And what are we not doing that we really might regret later? And just start there. The fun thing that we do every time, and everybody gets excited when we did the goal setting retreat, right? Let's plan our vacations.
Yay, it's my favorite thing.
Whether you're an employee, except for the 5 people who are unemployed, sorry.
Who can't afford vacations.
We know that the employed people in the US don't take their vacation.
Right.
And entrepreneurs and independent contractors are even worse.
Worst.
They're all battling burnout. So just the idea of, let's plan it out. I've told this story, you've heard me a million times talking about that conversation I had with Gary when we were going to do the staycation.
Well, share it.
And the idea was, Wendy and I were both stressed out. We just bought a house. Our kids were kind of small, and we were like, we're just going to enjoy the new pool
you just
and stay home.
the one thing, actually.
It was right about that time, and we were going to do a staycation. And Gary says, well, Gus at that time was 6, and he goes, you've only got about 10 left. He meant 10 spring breaks. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he just pointed out, because he has an older son, he's like, this idea of Jay, Wendy, Gus, and Veronica going on spring break, by the time he's 16, you're lucky if they're still going with you. It might be their friends, or they're bringing in a girlfriend, or they're gone with them. But this idea, you've only got 10, how are you going to use them? So that time is so precious. And so if you've got kids, you're like, wow, okay, so we've got maybe 7 summers left with our kids. Where would we love to plan for and work backwards? Do we want to go to Yellowstone? We took our kids to Machu Picchu.
Yeah.
What are the places that would be awesome to go with our kids at this age? So just vacations alone might save you a ton of regrets later in life if you just got a little bit more purposeful about it.
Right. And what we did that year is we just put down all of our bucket list items,
which was fun,
which was super fun. And then we organized it according to the ages of our children. So it makes sense to go to Disney World, when they're 8. It makes more sense to go to Africa when they're 16 and 17. And that just helped us sort of organize that and be really purposeful about it.
Yeah. I'll share one thought. And while that's happening, what questions do you have? Start submitting them in the questions box. Kaylin's over here. She'll filter through them, and she can start feeding them this way. That way we can make sure this is also an experience that's customized to you. This was something Amy and I didn't do a good job of this last year.
Oh.
In terms of...
We all did it for the first time.
We did a better job in terms of taking vacation, but what we did not ask is what are the vacations we want to take and actually put them in order of priority.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Shocker. Because what ended up happening is all of a sudden weddings popped up, or bachelorette, or bachelor parties, or a girls' weekend, and before you know it, we're just arbitrarily saying yes. And as we get to the end of the year, the one vacation that really mattered to my wife was no longer in the budget.
Oh no.
The single vacation that she actually wanted to take, we didn't take.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. I
Yeah.
mean, you're so good at telling on yourself because that's instructive. But I mean, that's great. That's a regret you don't want someone else to have if they don't have to have it.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to pass them via sticky note?
Well,
Is that
and
how you're going to do it?
What I'd love to chat a little bit about is really just the framework of the weekend.
Yeah.
So the way it starts out typically is we drive to the hotel, or that first year was a little cabin.
Mm-hmm.
And that first night, it's very relaxed.
Right.
So just go out to dinner, have fun, just have a very relaxing.
I usually will have a notebook. I mean, I guess
evening.
today you probably have your smartphone, but like with your notes, so you're coming up with ideas.
But I think that first year was very chill because there was no, I wanted it just to be bonding for us kind of.
Yeah.
And then the next day was more of the work.
Yeah.
But then also the reward for the work that afternoon is, remember, we got that massage person to come and give us a massage, and then sort
Which
of,
when you have two kids that are,
that was huge.
under 2,
Yeah.
it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And then so that's how that framework really looked like. But it was like just a relaxing evening first, and then the work was the next day.
And that's pretty much how it still goes.
Mm-hmm.
Like we'll do dinner the first night. We'll kind of get our agenda together. Next morning, we'll order room service or get a quick breakfast. Then we go back to the room and get our laptops out.
Yeah. So it's important to have
And
like
it's just
a
boom.
nicer room that's more comfortable that you can spread out in.
One year
to
we
do
were
it.
up in Massachusetts, maybe. I remember the hotel room wasn't super comfortable. I actually
Yeah.
remember being like up
Yeah.
against the wall
Yeah.
for a while.
I
I was
think
like,
we're
we
New
could
Hampshire.
learn a lesson there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why do you choose this time of year?
Well, I learned this from Gary, so that's a good question. I think a lot of people actually will wait to do their goal setting till late December, or even January for a lot of people, if we're being honest. I know I did. A lot of times, other than like a resolution or something, it wasn't really till that holiday break that I'd really even start thinking about it. I would, for years and years, when started working with Gary, started working with him in the summer of 2002. So probably the first time he did it was in 2003. In late October to late November, sometime in that window, I would get photocopies of his entire year of his calendar. And when we talk about the 3 things that you time block, that was all it was on it then, right? He had his vacations time blocked. We had our planning times when we were going to do our 411s together, and when he would do them with his other executives, because he wanted his other executives to be there in Austin those days. And then we had our writing days.
Yep.
And he usually would have those plotted out till August. And what he wanted was to give me ample opportunity. So he was willing to do the work really early so that everyone else would have the opportunity to have a little negotiation room. Like, oh, I'm taking my kids to Africa. Can we move this? Like, he had a lot of people in his world. And we just adopted a bigger model. If you're going to have a big life, it makes sense at some point you might want to be ahead of the game.
Yep.
And that way you can, people on the team, we
And
can
what a
now
great
negotiate that
feeling,
with it. Oh,
right?
yeah.
What a great feeling to just sail into next year and know, like, I've got these bucket list vacations already planned.
Yep.
Yeah. Or
One
not
of
even
them-
bucket list vacations. Sometimes they're just, like one fall break, we just went to Arkansas.
Yeah. We got to find out exactly how many dry counties they have there. Long way to drive to get a glass of wine. I was going to say, one of the things that Gary did, I've told you this story, he usually would do 1 week of vacation for every other month. And I remember once asking him, I said, hey, I see you're out of town in April. Where are you going? He goes, I don't know. I just blocked it off because I'll probably need it. And I just remember that made a real impression on me. Like, he doesn't even have to know where he's going yet. He just assumes he's going to be working hard and need the time off.
I think that's so important. Like, I know for me personally, that's very true. Like, we have these big lives and people are like, how can you do all that you do? And then it's like, well, I look forward to my vacation. When I'm on vacation, I actually take a vacation and I unplug and I refresh and I can come back and start work again.
Well, how many of you who are here live or listening to this later have ever had that time pop up when you realized, I really need to take a vacation, or we want to go take this vacation, and you go and you look at your planner and realize there's no time to take it. Everything is booked and you just can't see canceling and rescheduling that many things.
Yep.
That was my life for my entire professional career until you shared that story with me, and the idea of just looking at a planner proactively and just marking the dates off. There are times I've taken those days back, but there's also times where I said, honey, I got nothing planned today. Let's go for a walk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And she is so happy. Fast forward, you show up to your goal setting retreat, you start envisioning what you want your life to look like, and you start setting goals. What happens when you realize that you're not on the same page or that you have goals that are not aligned?
Oh, that never happens.
For people who are listening, they're rolling their eyes because that was sarcastic.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It happens a lot. And I think that part of any relationship, if you're being realistic, right? So I'm making assumptions that when we talk about significant others, that people have made a long-term commitment to these people. So I'm going to do it from the frame of a long-term, lifelong commitment. We're not going to be on the same page every day. It's impossible. The person I married is a different person today. A lot of the reasons I married her are still there, but they've grown and changed. And I would assume the same of me. She likes to point out I was still getting allowance from my mom when I met her. So I'll just go ahead and nip that in the bud as I was a graduate student. So you look up and we've grown.
It was a little allowance though.
You look up and you've grown and you've changed. And I mean, that should be normal and expected, but I think it surprises some people. So I do think that normally I just envision kind of like the double helix, right? Like a DNA, that you're kind of coming in and out of sync. And that's normal. So if you sit down and where you want to go feels divergent, that might be a sign of something really serious, and that would be scary. But better to know early than late. But it also, right, it also just might be part of the normal rhythm that you're kind of going to be doing this a lot. But it gives you a chance to course correct and say, wow, if you're going way over there, how are we going to get together? Can we plan for that?
Right.
Well, and I also think what's great about that is that especially if you're planning further out, you can almost see some things coming. So I know for a long time you had on your goals that you wanted to own some land. You wanted to have a ranch in Texas. It's Texas, so there's a lot of land here. And that had been on your goals for 5 years. And, I have to be honest, that was never a goal of mine.
Nope.
But it always showed up on your goals. And so I got to review it every year. And then when you had the opportunity to kind of quickly go into a partnership with someone who also wanted to buy a ranch, normally I might have been like, ooh, I don't know if that's going to work. But because we'd been doing the goal setting retreat and I'd seen it on your goals year after year after year, and I knew how much you really wanted it, and it wasn't just a passing fancy, which honestly, if we hadn't talked about it, it might have felt like that.
Yeah.
I might have been like,
just
wow.
An idea.
Yeah, like, what are you doing? That's insane. And so because of that, I was more okay with it.
Well, I'll share with them when we were prepping to shoot the goal setting retreat course that we just filmed. You looked at Kaylin and I and asked, and I'll ask this to you, what computer company did Melinda Gates start? Put the answer in the questions box. Pop quiz, prize for the winner. What computer company did Melinda Gates start? She didn't. Yet that was something that Bill wanted to do. And just because something was a goal for one person didn't mean that she had to have the exact equal goal. And it was more of, for you guys, having insight into what mattered to the other person and asking the question, how do we support one another?
Yeah. Yep. And I think a healthy relationship, there's going to be some give and take, but this gives you a platform for kind of knowing if you're in the season of asking for help or giving it. And I can remember when Wendy, there was a reckoning moment when she was going back to work, because when she had quit her job, she had gone home to be the full-time mom. She had taken on a lot more of the household duties. It made sense. But then when she went back to work, there wasn't a formal transition.
Yeah.
And I got very good conversation, very helpful, wasn't fun for me, where I got made aware of all the jobs that I was going to be getting back.
Yeah.
But again, when you have that framework, like is that the giving and taking is going to be normal. Hopefully it goes back and forth and it's not all one way. It gives you an opportunity to ask for help. Yeah. I need your help this year. So can you play a little less golf this year or whatever that is and be a little bit more of this so I can have this happen. But like you said, if it's been there and you're asking for it, it doesn't feel like it's just a fancy. You know that it's something that's important to them.
Yeah. Well, it also gives you a framework for like, can we talk about our marriage? I remember those first goal setting questions like, well, how's the health of our marriage? Is it where we want it to be? Can it be better? And I just don't think that when you're sitting around the table having dinner, you're asking those kind of questions. You're probably just doing your own thing.
Yeah. Which for everybody who's watching or listening, we have a kick-ass guide to your couple's goal setting retreat. If you go to theonething.com with the number 1 in the URL, click on free stuff. It should be right there at the top, and it's got all these questions that you can ask for all the different categories. So better than trying just to scribble your pen as fast as possible and us review it here, best that you go there and download that and you'll have it.
And we got a framework in there for a 1-night retreat or a 2-night retreat.
Yeah.
So we kind of created a little framework for both.
Yeah.
Nice.
Several people have asked, how do you, once you have your goal setting retreat, how do you keep your goals in front of you throughout the year? What does that look like? Do you come back together on a quarterly basis or mid-year? What does that look like?
You know this about me. Like, so I carry,
snap.
I carry my notebook with me wherever I go. I've got my 411, which is my goal setting document, and stapled to it is the document that I've probably for 6 years been creating. I just started taking all the stuff we talked about from the year before and put it in one. I used a PowerPoint.
It's good stuff.
And so I've got our 5-year goals, I've got our 1-year goals, I've got our org charts and business plans. Like, it's now 21 pages. It used to be 3. Like, that's what happens over time. But now every time I look at my goals for the month or the week, underneath them, all I have to do is lift the paper and I can see what my 5-year goals are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
I do not do that, by the way.
I know, I'm just sharing what I do, but that, but that is one of those things that, like, the ranch was used to be on the front page.
Yeah.
And every time I would tear off my 411 to put the new one in, guess what I got to see?
Yeah.
Ranch.
And that was one of those things that, like, my son was wanting to hang out with me in the woods. And in Texas, there's not much public land. And I remember calling my good buddy and saying, can I bring my son out for the hunting weekend? And he goes, it's gonna be a bunch of older guys. You know, they might be drinking. I don't think it's appropriate. I just remember going, okay, I don't want to miss this time. I remember my dad taking me hunting. And that was the main reason, the drive. I mean, I wanted it for me, but I wanted it to be that thing that we could share with the kids. Of course, the kids are like screaming and kicking every time we take them now. There's no Wi-Fi, Dad. I can't play my Xbox. He'll appreciate it later. But having him physically with me, I have a physical notebook. So how can you keep them in your environment so that you have to confront them? How do you keep them top of mind?
Well, I just have we call it the 411 with Keller Williams. And so I have my annual goals up there, and I just look at those once a week, really, when I'm doing my 411.
Voila.
Actually, probably every day I look at them, but I don't carry a paper version around with me. So
yeah,
but I love that you do.
I'm old school that way.
I would lose it. So
yeah,
I like to write on it when I have ideas.
Yeah,
and I literally just took your model. I've got my little packet that sits in the middle of my one thing planner. It's got my 409 and my someday 5-year.
My goals are my bookmark.
Yep, exactly. Okay.
Other questions? What we got?
Oh yeah. How do you manage situations that come up and interfere with your goals, like illness or family challenges?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing about goal setting is at the end of the day, all the goals that we've ever set, you know, maybe we've accomplished 75% of them, 80% of them.
More like 25.
Oh no.
I think it's the flip, because there's a lot of them I think we write down, and like 3 months into it, we're like, what were we thinking? And we get rid of it.
We'll definitely would go back after, you know, like when we do our retreat this weekend, we'll look at our goals from the last year, and there'll be just some things that don't make sense.
Oh, I could show you a list of them.
Yeah.
And we thought they were important when we did the retreat.
Right.
And then you look up a quarter later and you realize, okay, that was a great idea, but it's not really a priority now.
I really wanted to plant some fruit trees on the ranch for like 5 years. I keep putting it on the goal setting thing, but we never do it. Although we did put a deck on this year.
Yeah, we did.
And that's been on there for several years. But life happens, you know.
Well, like you're
We've
luckily,
had a lot of personal stuff happen to us
your dad got sick. Her dad got sick a while back.
Yep.
And I can remember we were planning for an investment property, and she's like, you know what? Probably need to think about helping my dad get a place that's handicap accessible.
Yeah.
So instead of investing in another piece of real estate, we ended up kind of becoming the bank for them to move into a handicap accessible place.
Yeah.
And we just did that for her mom and her sister who moved down. And so family has happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know how long you remember it, but I remember having about 2 weeks of warning before your mom moved into town.
Mm-hmm.
And we then look at our goals and say, okay, well, how are we going to handle this? But because we have a framework for handling things, it at least makes it something that we can, okay, well, we'll trade this chit for that chit. So investment property becomes house for grandpa.
Mhm.
So you at
Well-
least have things that you can swap out
Yeah.
and make choices. You have a playing field to work with versus just
Yeah.
going into pure panic.
Yeah. Well, and I know that we've always had a goal for our charitable giving that included our family. You know, do we need to give some money to different members of our family that might need it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. What does it look like to involve kids in this? Do you involve your kids?
We just drag them along.
No, they don't come. No.
No, in terms of they
Yeah.
get to hear what goals we're setting for our family.
Yeah, but
They
they've
know
never
that
come to the retreat.
No.
Some people are probably confused by what you
I
just
meant
said.
drag along as in if
Yeah.
you're a minority partner in a corporation, it's
Yeah.
the drag along clause
We
means
talk
you
a
have to
lot
go with the
about-
majority partners.
Yeah.
You don't have a choice.
We talk a lot about goal setting around the table, and so I think that through osmosis they learn it. But we have never done, and we have, on Sunday nights we do, not every Sunday, but when we can, we do
Family
kind of
meeting.
family meeting.
Yeah.
And we do they do their goal setting for the week, and we talk about it, and we'll be working on pretty much every Sunday. We work on our 411s. We're just sitting around the house.
There's a lot that they're picking up by osmosis, right? Because
yeah,
we do
and
talk
teaching
about
them.
these things, and that's they're going to catch every cuss word we ever say. We know that's a fact.
Mhm.
Hopefully some of the other good stuff sticks too.
Mhm.
And so you look up, and I just remember like we went to our last big trip was to Italy, right?
Yeah.
Before Alaska, Italy.
Mhm.
And I just remember our daughter was like, can we please not go somewhere which is like full of ruins and trees? Because like
No, actually, she said, "Do we have to go to Italy again?"
doing Italy again. And it's like, he's like, but she actually was expressing like, she's definitely wants to go places.
Yeah.
It actually led to a conversation. So when we're
Right.
planning our vacations, I actually have this in my notes.
Yeah.
She's like,
Yeah.
well, where would you like to go?
Yeah.
It's like, she wasn't quite sure, but she wanted to go to like, what about
City.
Japan?
Yeah. She wanted to
Or
go
like an
city.
urban. And I was like, okay, I'm probably not going to take you to Japan, but maybe we could all go to New York City. Right. And that's a big city. And she got really excited about that. So like we can involve them where it's appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the time, and say they're along for the ride. We also get to role model maybe how they should be thinking about
Mhm.
things, take their feedback, but I'm not quite
Yeah.
ready to hand them the keys.
Yeah, and I think for us, the marriage has always been the primary relationship. I think a lot of people don't feel that way,
Thank you.
or they let their children sort of take over. And I always tell my kids, I'm like, listen, I love your dad more. I picked your dad. You guys are random. And, after you guys are gone, your dad and I will still be here. And a lot of people don't approach their families that way. They really think like, oh, my kids are my primary. But this is the primary, and this is the way we take time for the primary in our life. And our kids are a part of that, but we're at the core.
She's not joking. She is. And I mean, you know that. I mean,
They're
the
fine.
tattoos, right? I mean, that's like first is husband, then father. And, I remember talking to Veronica about this. I said, you and your brother share one, and your mom's got one all to yourself.
What do you mean by that for
The
people?
my first domino, right?
Yeah.
My first two hats. My first one's
Show
husband.
them your domino.
My
Show 'em
second one is
Show 'em the
father.
tattoo.
And he actually has dominoes tattooed on his forearm.
And that's just my reminder, but that's my two biggest priorities. And if those are working, everything else falls in place, but mom comes first. And the truth is, like, especially when they were little, if the building's burning, like, I expect us to go in and save the kids and the dog. And I hope she makes it out. But like on a day-to-day basis, I got to put this relationship first. We get a chance to role model what that looks like.
Yeah.
And I've known a lot of couples
Yeah.
where the kids, they become empty nesters. What happens a few years later?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
stop spending time together. Like their relationship doesn't make sense anymore because they had prioritized the other one first. And I don't want that to be us.
Well, I think especially when your kids are very small, but really the whole time you have children, to just take a weekend just for the two of you is really powerful. You're like, oh, this is why I fell in love with you. You're incredible.
That's where date night came from.
We're in love again, and it's just a very powerful thing.
What do you mean by date night? Walk people through what that looks like for you guys.
Well, I mean, pretty much not long after we started our goal setting retreats, or at that same time, you got small kids, you don't have, it just feels like you're always chained to going home, and the kids somebody has to be put to bed or change the diaper. So I think Gary said, why don't y'all institute a date night? We started by trying to do it on Fridays and Saturdays. We couldn't consistently get babysitters, so for, I don't know, probably going on a decade, we've been having date night
Yeah.
on Wednesday nights.
Yep.
And
And it
kind
used
of
to be
people in
that
the world know
it used
that.
to be that our daughter would just cry in the driveway as we drive away. And now they're like, "Oh, you're leaving? Oh, see you later." You know?
It's like, is there mac and cheese for me to make?
Right, exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We don't need, but that was like, there's the once a year, the retreat, or if we get to take another vacation, it's great. But we, pretty early on, we instituted, at least trying for every week, we might average in the very beginning, maybe twice a month,
Mm-hmm.
a regular habit of getting together so that we could reconnect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For the same reason.
Yeah.
It's a mini goal setting retreat,
Yeah.
right?
For those of you who are on this live, keep the questions coming. Kaylin keeps passing me little sticky notes, so happy to continue answering your questions. One of the questions came up around, what does it mean to do the work, and how is setting goals work?
So using the framework, which we've adopted the last few years.
Well, I think what they're asking was, I think it was about my comment where I said the relaxation was on Friday night and then
Yeah.
the work was on Saturday. Okay.
I was going to say the basic framework is you have your someday goals, your 5-year goals, and your 1-year goals. And we mostly, our work is around where do we want to be in 5 years. We focus a lot on that because it feels concrete. The someday stuff we talk about in general, don't have a lot of that. I don't have any of that written down.
Someday stuff.
Yeah, we might somewhere, but we talk about
They're
it.
very general.
Very general, but you get a lot more specific on the 5-year goals. In 5 years, we'd like these things to happen. So we spend a lot of time talking about those. And then based on that,
And
what has to happen
they're
this
pretty
next year?
measurable. So I would say, yeah, this is like very specifically, this is what kind of passive income we want to have.
Yeah,
Or
what
this
is our
where we
income?
want
What's our
net
passive
worth.
income, our net worth?
So it is a little bit of work, and then it's not just like, oh, we want to be rich, we want to be happy, we want to be, debt free or whatever it is. It's very specific.
And this is where, for those of you who are in the community where we're always doing trainings on the 411, when you ask, how do you even get your ideas for what goes on a business plan or a 411? This is what it looks like. Envisioning a life someday from now, identifying clear, specific, measurable 5-year goals, 1-year goals. You create your plan, you create your 411, you open your planners, you time block it. That's the work.
That's the thing. Like, if you guys, like, this is the thing that has created so much success in our life that we would never have dreamed it. It's the goal planning and thinking out 5 years and then taking that and turning it into a business plan every year and putting it on our 411. Like I tell the people on my real estate team, I say, if you can get into the habit of the 411, you can literally do anything. And I would, of course, love everybody that comes onto my team to stay there forever, but I understand if people will leave. And the one thing that I want them to get is the habit of the 411, because that's what's going to give them success forever. And
you did it for years before.
Yeah, I did it way before I was in real estate.
Yeah.
So I did it when I worked with a different company because my company didn't have a framework like this. So I used the 411 and I used it for the people that worked for me because I just thought it was incredible. And the 411 is the thing. Yeah. It's the thing for success.
And you look at that every day, if not every week. That's
every
where
day.
those
every
big
day.
Goals in the future, because you've worked backwards.
Every day.
What does that mean for 5 years for this year? That year for my month, that monthly goal for my year. You work backwards. When you look at your week, what do I have to accomplish? You're actually on track for that 5-year goal.
Yeah.
And that's the magic of that process. So I would say go to page, I can't remember the page number. Is it 114, the 7 circles?
Yes.
And I would just ask the question. That's in the document that they can download. What do we want our lives to look like in 5 years for, our spiritual life, for our physical health, our relationships? And for us, we might talk about her parents, my parents, both kids individually. Like, we break out the personal relationships by the ones that really stand out. Because sometimes there's very specific, like each kid is different. We don't just lump them together. It's like, what hobbies do we want to try to foster with Gus? What do we want to try to bring to the surface for Veronica? So we're looking way out, and then we come up with our list for this year. Like, we had a long list of stuff for our kids, and like, we were going to try these things. And a lot of them, I was looking at some of them for our kids. We did pretty good this year.
Yeah. What are some of the boundaries or expectations that should be set when you come into this with that other person so that you stay in a productive lane and you don't go outside the rails?
Great question. Well, I think you have to both be committed to having an outcome at the end of it, which would hopefully be some goals that you agree on together. Like, that's the outcome. And then the other outcome is you are closer as a couple. Those to me would be the two outcomes.
I would probably say let's focus on moving forward, not assessing blame for the past.
Yeah.
Like when I worry about when we did our first facilitation for a group last year for our goal setting retreat that we do in person, and that's coming up.
Yeah.
I was really worried like that people wouldn't be on the same page, and I would suddenly have to transform into a marriage counselor, which I am not qualified to do. Barely have enough to muster through our disagreements and make sure that I'm not on the losing end. But I think that agreeing on the front end, let's focus on where we want to go and why it's important to us. And let's not acknowledge where we disagree, but let's get out of here's everything that's wrong with you. Because I do think that if you've never done this before, I don't like the idea of an annual review. That's one of the reasons I love doing a 411 on a weekly basis. When people have a long time between assessments, they tend to load up. And there's some personality types, the times people who like to hold grudges, they can unload. And so I think that would probably not be the right setting. Do that with the counselor in the room with you. Show up and let's talk about, this is where I'd like us to go. How do you feel about that? What can we do together? Where can we agree to?
The past is the past.
Yeah. What progress can we agree on to try to make towards this year?
Yeah.
And then the only other thing I would say is definitely have that agenda. Start with the kick-ass, whatever you call it now. What did you brand it as?
The kick-ass guide to your couples goal setting retreat.
And
we got the trademark. We got to use it.
You flared it up.
That's where it comes from.
You flared it up.
Thank you.
And then so have some kind of framework and really stick to it, because I know that it's easy to kind of just relax, and Jay likes to read the paper in the morning, so I always feel like I'm like the taskmaster, but I'm
gonna get my coffee before we get to work.
Let's get some work done. I'm like, let's get the work done.
Yeah, well, and she's talking about the framework, and we've got 3 options for those of you who are watching this or listening to this. First, download the guide. If you go to theonething.com, click on free stuff, you can download the Kick-Ass Guide to your couples goal setting retreat there. It'll give you a lot of the questions and things you can go through. When we start talking about the work.
And that document, by the way, is the document we shared with, I don't know, hundreds of couples. And we've heard from people that was enough for them, in the beginning. They could just self-start with that for sure.
It actually kind of makes me nervous because I don't know where I copied those questions from at the beginning.
You'll be good.
We worked on them.
When it comes to following the models of establishing someday goals, 5-year goals, 1-year goals, doing a 1-page business plan for those goals, doing 411s and time blocking them, that's where more facilitation comes in, which 2 options. We facilitate a retreat every year. If you go to theonething.com and click on the training tab, you'll see the couples goal setting retreat that Jay, Kaylin, and I are facilitating. You'll also see
that's in November.
Yeah, it's coming up in about a month. And then you'll also see the online course.
What is it? November 17th
and 18th.
Okay, yeah.
And you'll see the online course.
I'll be there too.
Yeah, you can meet both of them. And for those that can't actually make it to Austin but want to have us there facilitating it for you, wherever you choose to do it, there'll be an online course this year, which you can get on the wait list for. And that's all at the training page.
Or for a special person and the right price, Jeff will come facilitate a one-on-one weekend with you. No, just kidding.
Be careful.
The price
I might do it.
It's very expensive.
That'll be your charity auction item.
There we go. Yeah.
You just get like a twin bed.
Why do you need?
We didn't have to go there.
I'm sorry.
I've done so good building a filter. You just ripped it down.
I know.
Okay.
So what other questions do we need to answer for the folks that gave us an hour? Yeah.
There was a question about how do you handle when your goals aren't met, which I think it's worth talking about. What is the actual purpose of a goal?
So when your goals aren't met?
Yeah, when you don't meet your goals that you set.
Well, I mean, there's 2 modalities, right? The first question I asked, like if we've done absolutely nothing, why did we met that goal to begin with? Like, was that even a legitimate goal? Because sometimes we get caught up in the moment and we think that would be really cool,
fun.
Right? That's the whole point. Like the first year, that was what the ranch was. And the second year, that was what the ranch was. But by the 3rd year, she's probably thinking, okay, he keeps writing this down. There's something behind this. So I first acknowledge that sometimes the planning fallacy, we think we can do a lot more than we actually can.
Or sometimes life gets in the way, right?
But health might show up, an issue, a parent or your own health, and that sets you back. But when your goals aren't met, to me, there's only 2 things you can do. You can increase the activity so that you can meet them, or if you've exceeded your goals, you can raise the goals or just say awesome and do something else. But if it's important to you, you just don't accept, all right, great. I mean, we don't beat ourselves up. We're behind. We ask the question, how do we catch up? I carry the loss forward though. Like when we set our goal for being a millionaire, if we showed up and we had a goal for having a net worth of 500,000, and the next year it was going to be 600,000, but we only got to 450. Well, guess what? We had to make up 150 to get back on track, because I don't want to extend the deadline, because the people who just extend the deadline with no consequences, they don't ever get there.
Yeah.
It's really easy to do that.
Well, but I also think too, like, who do you become on the way? Like if you set a big goal, right? Your big goal is to read 50 books a year, and you're only reading 10 books a year. And at the end of the year, you're like, oh, I read 35 books. And you're like, oh, I didn't meet my goal. Well, yeah, but look how many books you read.
That's me. I've always set that goal, and I've never hit it.
Well, you always do like 49. I'm always like, read a shorty, like read a little guy. And you're like, no, Jay's has too much integrity, so he never does that. But I'm like, just read Who Moved My Cheese or something.
Well, I think the key there is, and Gary said this, the purpose of a goal is to be appropriate in the moment.
Yeah.
It's less about achieving the result and more about casting a vision for where you want to be, so you can ask the question, who do I need to become?
A lot of them is, I mean, I'll quote, you had James Clear on, and I love him in this idea of people going and having specific goals about their body fat and all that. And that's appropriate if you're really competitive at that sort of thing. But sometimes it's just like who you want to be. Like, am I the kind of person who goes to the gym 3 times a week?
Yeah.
I just want to, that's who I am. And therefore those other things, like some of the specifics will take care of themselves. I'm a person who reads. And over the course of your life, those dominoes get bigger and bigger.
That's like the understatement of the year, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the questions came in, is it worth doing if you don't have a significant other? Should you do this with yourself?
Yeah, for sure.
We had a lot of people in the audience that came to the couples goal setting retreat. Some didn't bring their spouse, and wish they had, and some didn't have a spouse. But build a habit. How wonderful when you finally meet that person, to invite them along and already be comfortable with the framework. You can be their guide.
Yeah.
At least you know where you're going. And I think that's kind of sexy and attractive in a future mate.
And often what I do is I'll take a afternoon and I'll do a goal setting retreat with myself. I might do a mid-year reset, or I might do it before our goal setting retreat, just to get clarity around my thoughts. Yeah. So I think it's really important.
Well, we talk about that even in our facilitation. I think if you are a couple, right, or not, it really is helpful to do some of the work separately, because if there's a imbalance in who's more persuasive or more assertive in your relationship, if you've done pre-work, you at least show up and say, here are the 3 things that are really important for me around X. Mm-hmm. It's already on paper, and therefore at least your voice will be in the conversation, versus you get the mad brainstormer in the couple that just dominates the whiteboard, and the other person, so I do think
it's like every time we want to see a movie, Jay always knows what movie he wants to see, and he's like, what movie do you want to see? I'm like, he's like, how about that one? I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Well, and I can tell you, at least, especially for the retreat that we're facilitating this year, already at least 30% of the total registrants are individuals that are coming. And if you listen to the One Thing podcast, I think it was episode 159, I had Jake and Alex Dreyfus on. Jake came last year to the retreat. He wanted his wife, Alex, to come with him. There was no way she was coming. It just wasn't going to happen. And he still came, and he asked the question, how can I just show up as the best version of myself this year? And his change was so rapid that Alex couldn't help but start to ask, okay, how can I drink some of that Kool-Aid?
Yeah.
And now they're both coming this year.
That's cool.
Yeah. So
it's a process. I mean, it really is a process. And to go from A to, J, where we are now, it's just, year after year, day after day, month after month.
One thing at a time.
That's right.
Over time.
The dominoes get bigger on their own. You don't have to jump ahead.
Yeah.
Somebody asked, how many goals should we be setting at this point? Is there such a thing as too many goals, not enough goals?
Well, we know that you can only focus on one thing at any given moment, right? That's the big principle in the book. I look at those 7 areas of your life, could be 6 if you don't have a business. I think I would at least start with, are we being purposeful in those areas? Mm-hmm. Right? Do we have a plan? I mean, for most people, the spiritual stuff is not that complicated. It might be, but in general, that's usually a choice about doing something. Like, are we going to attend services? Are there rituals that we want to bring into our life? And some of the other ones are a little bit more complicated, but those are at least give you some buckets to start with. Mm-hmm. And that's how we've built the whole framework
Yeah,
around
again,
this.
it's a framework. And if you look at one of those categories and you're like, I'm all good.
Yeah.
Then you don't put a goal there.
Yep. What are some final questions that we have before we wrap it up? Go ahead and start putting those in the questions box now. Any of the biggest mistakes that you would warn people of so that they don't have to repeat them?
I would say, we have a couple years we've waited,
Yeah.
just because of life
Timing.
circumstances and timing, and honestly not really planning ahead. Because when I say this weekend we're going to put our goal setting retreat on the calendar for next year, we haven't always done that. We've put maybe our vacations, but not this particular retreat. And so we've waited until late into December. And I never like that. I prefer to do it mid-October.
There may have been
This
one
is my
that we did
total-
in January. I
Yeah,
think.
this is my total preference is to do it this time of year, just because, well, especially now that I'm in real estate, we're already in 2009.
You're laying the groundwork.
When you have a business, you're definitely thinking a couple months
We'll
out.
talk about that a little bit, because you talk a lot about the models and the focus, the intention that we show up in our businesses or our jobs with, and applying that to a personal life.
Well, in business, the work that you do in the fourth quarter is absolutely setting up your first quarter. They're connected. They're not separate. So if you have no idea where you're going to start your year, you're not setting anything up for success next year, and you're already behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well,
what
it's
I love
it's like
about,
rolling into Monday morning and not really knowing what you're going to do for the week.
yeah, which is a mistake that a lot of people make,
Mhm.
and the 411 helps prevent that, right? Because you walk into your work week with at least your agenda set. At work, it seems normal to bring this kind of rigor to it, right? If you work for a big corporation, everybody's got quarterly goals. That's what it looks like. And they break down those quarters into months, and everybody knows what their agenda is and their KPIs for X, Y, Z. And that's how billions of dollars move through the system. And I think there is some wisdom in taking some of that framework and applying it to your personal goals, which I would argue matter a lot more, right? We do spend a lot of time at work, and there is a lot at stake there. I get that. But why wouldn't you borrow the best of those frameworks? Like, do executives hang out at home to do an executive retreat? No, they go to a spa somewhere. They get them out to do their goal setting retreats. That's where you go and do your one thing speeches, right? It's usually at some off site.
Yeah.
This is something that people have known for decades and decades. Get out of your element. You'll see your world differently. It'll give you better perspective.
Right. And what I find fascinating is that a lot of people talk about, their big why, the reason they do all this work is their family. But if you look at how they actually spend their time and their effort and what they read and what they study, they're actually spending, 90% of their time on their business and really not studying how to be a better parent, how to be a better spouse. Their activities don't really reflect their intention.
Yeah.
I think we would both argue that if you had better goals in place and more clarity about where you wanted to be, your activities might change.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The question came in is, can you do this with a team? Which I'll just say, absolutely. We've got a number of teams, even a region of a company coming to the retreat. This is about setting goals with the people that have a stake in your success, whether that is a significant other, a business partner, a friend, a team, or if you're doing this for yourself, it absolutely can be done.
Well, a business partner is a lot like a business marriage.
For sure.
Because, I'm sorry, it's one of those things where you've made a commitment, you're partners, you're co-owners.
You probably would delete that question about the sex life, though, if it was a business partner.
Yes.
So when would we like to go on our retreat together, Jay?
We have one on the books. And it's coming up in just a couple of weeks. So we're going to get out of the office and share business plans.
I told you not to make me feel weird.
Yeah, it's you went there. You're the one who went there for the record.
You knocked that lead domino down, Wendy.
Yeah. But I do think that's a very important business relationship. And you can keep all the right formality to it, but you need to be on the same page with your business partners. I can't tell you how many times I've sat down, my coffee ritual, my networking habit, and I hear of someone who had this great business, and I said, well, what happened to it? Well, my partner and I kind of diverged, and we ended up, my partner wanted to be bought out, or I wanted to be bought out. But because they didn't plan for it, they weren't communicating, that's how they got to that place anyway, usually the business ends up dying.
Yeah.
It doesn't survive a divorce of the partners. So it is an important relationship, and you need to manage it with care.
Yep. Final question. What's the one thing we can do to make sure we're prepared to attend the retreat in Austin? that came from the audience.
I'll let you go first. I feel like I'm dominating.
So let's see. Let me think. One thing we could do to get prepared. Well, I would say start thinking about what your goals are for 2019, whatever that looks like in whatever area of life.
Download the document and get out whatever your preferred, laptop or whatever, and start answering the questions that matter to you, so that when you sit down with your partner, you've done some of the pre-work. I mean, you and I at this point, like if we have a business, like start thinking through your goals and your business plan, and that way, it is, I think, a mistake to show up and try to do all the work in the room. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
You end up having a lot of homework from the event. So we try to, now that we've learned, like we usually show up and say, hey, I know I'm going to need help with this business plan, so we need to budget more time with it. But I show up with some of that work done.
Yeah. And if there's something you want to get better at, just understand where you're at already. So if you're like, I want to read a lot more books, well, really try to figure out how many books you read the previous year, because that'll give you a baseline.
Yeah. Well, there you have it, our monthly One Thing webinar series with Jay and Wendy Papasan. 3 options for you in terms of how you now take this and implement this. First, if you visit theonething.com with the number 1, click on free stuff, download the kick-ass guide to your couples goal setting retreat to identify some of the questions so you can do some of that pre-work. And if you want to have this process facilitated, you can either join us in Austin or you can go through the online course. Both options are on the training tab at theonething.com/training. Thanks so much. This will come out on the One Thing podcast, which you can subscribe anywhere podcasts are available. And we look forward to being with you next month for our next webinar.
Bye, guys.
Thanks all.